What happens when the most secure man in New York City is suddenly the most vulnerable? Jonas Thorne, the billionaire CEO of Helios Dynamics, thought he was untouchable. He sat in Aperture, a restaurant so exclusive you couldn't buy a reservation, surrounded by glass, wealth, and his personal bodyguard. But in 6 minutes, his world imploded. 5 men, moving like ghosts, stormed the dining room. His bodyguard was down in seconds. They weren't there to rob. They were there for him. But they missed one variable. Her name was Laura, the waitress, the one he hadn't even looked at. And she had a skill that was about to change everything. Aperture was not a restaurant. It was a statement, perched 42 stories above Central Park. Its dining room was a hushed cathedral of glass and brushed steel. The clients weren't just rich, they were significant. They were the kind of people who moved markets with a whisper and started wars with a memorandum. The restaurant's name, Aperture, was a quiet boast. This was a place where you could see the world, but the world couldn't see you. Laura Jenkins moved through this world with the practiced invisibility of a shadow. To the patrons, she was just Laura. A crisp white apron, a black pencil skirt, and a face that was pleasant but instantly forgettable. She was efficient. Her movements were economical, her voice a low murmur that never interrupted the flow of conversation. She refilled water glasses before they were empty, cleared plates the second a fork was set down, and fielded the passive-aggressive complaints of the 0.1% with a serene, manufactured patience. The Perrier Jouet is acceptable, a woman with a face stretched taut by surgery had murmured earlier. But the bubbles seem aggressive tonight. My apologies, madam. I will let the sommelier know, Laura had replied, her expression perfectly neutral. Tonight, the floor was heavy. A low-pressure system was rolling in over the Hudson, and the air in the dining room felt thick, charged with static. Laura felt it on her skin. She was polishing a wine glass at the service station when the front doors hissed open, admitting a new gravity into the room. Jonas Thorne. He didn't just enter, he occupied. Thorne was the CEO and founder of Helios Dynamics, the world's most powerful and most controversial private defense contractor. He was tall, with sharp features and Arctic blue eyes that scanned the room not with interest, but with an air of clinical assessment. He looked like a man who had never once in his life waited in a line. Behind him, a half step to the right, was his protection. A man named Rick, built like a vending machine, wearing a suit that cost more than Laura's monthly rent. He had a military bearing, a discreet earpiece, and hands that never strayed far from the front of his jacket. Daniel, the restaurant's obsequious manager, practically materialized from the floorboards. Mr. Thorne, a distinct pleasure. Your usual table is ready. It had better be, Daniel. Thorne's voice was baritone, clipping the ends of his words. And I want the 14 Petrus. Don't send the sommelier, just send the bottle. And you. He glanced at Laura as she stood by the station. Water, sparkling, no ice, and 3 lime wedges, not 2. Tell the bartender I'll know if he uses a gun. Yes, sir, Laura said. She didn't look him in the eye. That was the first rule of high-end service. Be present, but be absent. Thorne and his bodyguard were seated at table 1, the prime corner booth, with a 180-degree view of the park, and more importantly, a solid, reinforced wall behind it, and clear lines of sight to all entrances. Rick sat facing the room, his back to the window, his meal forgone, his eyes in constant, lazy motion. Laura delivered the water. Your limes, sir. Thorne didn't look up from his phone. It took you 3 minutes. I timed it. My apologies, sir. She retreated. From her station, she watched the room. It was a habit, one she'd never been able to break. She didn't just see patrons, she saw vectors, she saw behaviors. Table 4, the hedge fund manager, was lying to his wife. His smile was too quick, and his left hand kept tapping his thigh under the table. Table 7, the senator, was drinking too fast. He was angry about something, his grip too tight on his scotch. And Table 1, Thorne was agitated. He was scrolling, his thumb moving in sharp, angry jabs. Rick, the bodyguard, was good. He was scanning. But he was comfortable. He scanned the room, but he didn't scan the staff. He didn't clock the busboy who lingered too long near the fire exit. He didn't notice the 2 men in dark suits who had been nursing the same club sodas at the bar for 45 minutes. Laura noticed. She also noticed the black utility van that had double-parked on 59th Street, visible from the service corridor window. It had diplomatic plates, fake ones. The font was off, a subtle Garamond instead of the official Clarendon. A cold, familiar stillness settled over her, the kind of quiet that comes before a lightning strike. She turned to Daniel. "Daniel, I'm feeling a bit ill. Can I take my break? Right now?" Daniel frowned, annoyed. "Laura, it's prime service. Mr. Thorne is—" "Please," she said, letting a slight tremor enter her voice. "It's urgent." He sighed, exasperated. "Fine. 5 minutes. And wash your hands before you come back." "Thank you." Laura walked, not ran, toward the staff corridor. She didn't go to the restroom. She went to the staff lockers. Her hand was steady as she keyed in the code. 1001 815. The date of the Damascus incident, the day her old life ended. Inside, beneath her spare apron and a copy of Moby Dick, was a small, dense black canvas roll. She never went anywhere without it. She heard a thump from the dining room. Not a dish drop. A dead-weight thump. It was the sound of a body hitting a carpeted floor. A second later, a woman screamed. Laura stopped. She closed her eyes for 1 second. She was no longer Laura Jenkins, the waitress. That was the cover. The woman who opened her eyes was Kestrel. And her break was over. The transition was instantaneous. The soft, ambient music of Aperture died, cut short. The polite murmurs of the elite clientele turned into sharp, terrified shrieks. It hadn't started with a gunshot. That would have been amateurish. It started with the kitchen doors bursting open. Not with chefs, but with 3 men dressed in black tactical gear. Disguised under kitchen whites, they ripped off in one smooth motion. Simultaneously, the 2 men from the bar stood, and as one, they drew compact, suppressed submachine guns. "Down! Everybody down! On the floor! Now!" The voice was cold, professional, with a faint, unplaceable Eastern European accent. Rick, Thorne's bodyguard, was already moving. He was good. He stood, shoved Thorne down into the booth, and was drawing his Sig Sauer P2029 when the first man from the kitchen, Bravo, in Laura's internal designation, raised a weapon. It wasn't a gun, it was a high-voltage pulse taser. The blue-white arc spat across the room. Rick convulsed violently, a strangled cry escaping his lips as 80.0 volts locked up his entire muscular system. He collapsed, his head striking the edge of the marble table with a sickening crack. He didn't move. "Rick!" Thorne yelled, his voice cracking with the first hint of genuine panic. The 5 men formed a perfect, practiced semicircle. They ignored the jewelry, the wallets, the sobbing patrons. They moved with a terrifying, fluid purpose, converging on table 1. The leader, Alpha, was the one who had shouted. He was tall, his face obscured by a dark balaclava. He motioned to his team. 2, Charlie and Delta, began securing the perimeter, yanking phones from hands, while the other 2, Bravo and Echo, moved to support him at the target. "Mr. Thorne," Alpha said, his voice calm, almost polite. He unclipped a set of heavy-duty zip ties from his vest. "You will stand. You will put your hands behind your back. You will come with us. If you make a sound, we will execute the senator at table 7. Do you understand me?" Thorne, the man who commanded private armies, was white as a sheet. He nodded, his hands trembling. "Good. Now—" Alpha stopped. He'd heard something, a click-clack on the marble floor. It was Laura. She was standing in the archway of the service corridor, 10 yards away. She held a silver service tray in one hand. Her expression wasn't terrified. It was annoyed. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear in the terrified silence. Echo, the closest attacker, turned to her. He was a big man, broad-shouldered. He laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Zalishets vnizu, durna," he sneered in Ukrainian. "Stay down, stupid girl." He started to raise his taser. "I'm sorry," Laura said, taking one step forward. "You're in my station." Echo advanced on her, grabbing for her arm. "I said—" He never finished the sentence. The world slowed down for Laura. Her training took over, not as a memory, but as a reflex. Her mind became a cold, clear processor. Target, echo, threat, taser, proximity, contact range, collateral, none. As Echo's hand clamped down on her right bicep, Laura relaxed her entire body, sinking with the grab. This dropped her center of gravity and, more importantly, broke his balance, pulling him forward. In the same fluid motion, she swung the heavy silver tray. It wasn't a wild, panicked swing. It was a targeted strike. She used the thin, flat edge, rotating her hips and core, channeling all 120 pounds of her body weight into a single point of impact. The edge of the tray connected with Echo's throat, just above the tactical vest. The sound was a wet crunch. Echo's eyes went wide with shock. He released her arm, his hands flying to his neck as he tried to draw a breath that would not come. He gurgled, blood frothing at his lips from a crushed larynx, and pitched backward, collapsing onto a dessert cart. One down. The dining room fell into absolute, stunned silence. Even the sobbing stopped. Jonas Thorne stared, his mouth half open. Alpha, the leader, recovered first. The girl wasn't a civilian. She was a threat. "Forget the target," he roared. But this time the polite tone was gone. It was pure, raw fury. "Kill her! Kill her now!" The dining room at Aperture was designed for comfort, not combat. But to Laura, everything was a weapon. The two attackers, Charlie and Delta, moved on her simultaneously, a classic pincer maneuver. They were smart, staying 3 feet apart to avoid tangling their lines of fire. They still had their tasers up, not guns. They needed her alive, or at least quiet. Lethal force was noisy. Targets, Charlie, left. Delta, right. Range, 15 feet. Weapons, tasers. My advantage, environment. Laura didn't retreat. She advanced into the pincer. Charlie fired his taser. She saw the flash, heard the pop, and dropped, not backward, but into a low, lateral slide on the polished marble. The electrified probes sailed over her head, embedding in a plush velvet armchair. She was now at Charlie's feet. He looked down, surprised, and tried to stomp, but she was already moving. She drove the heel of her server shoe, a sensible flat with a reinforced toe, directly into the side of his right knee. It was an oblique kick, designed not to break, but to hyperextend. His knee buckled backward with a sound like a thick branch, snapping. Charlie screamed, a high-pitched sound that was abruptly cut off as Laura, rising from her crouch, grabbed the scalding hot coffee pot from a nearby warmer station and smashed it directly into his face. Ceramic, metal, and 190-degree dark roast exploded. He went down, blinded and choking. 2 down. Delta was on her. He had dropped his taser and pulled a knife, a military-grade car bar. He was smarter, faster. He didn't lunge. He jabbed, a professional thrust aimed at her center mass. Laura didn't block. She parried. She used the one weapon she'd taken from her locker, the one thing she'd slipped into her apron pocket. It wasn't a gun. It was a waiter's friend, a high-end sommelier-grade corkscrew with a small, serrated foil cutter blade. She met his knife hand not with force, but with physics. She deflected his wrist, moving with his momentum, and stepped inside his guard, jamming her body against his. He was too close to stab, too close to punch. He smelled like sweat and clove gum. "Who are you?" he grunted, trying to wrestle the knife free. Laura didn't answer. Her left hand shot up, fingers rigid, and jammed hard into the pressure point beneath his jaw. The styloid process. His head snapped back in agonizing, involuntary reflex. In that single, perfect opening, her right hand, holding the corkscrew, found its mark. She didn't stab. She hooked the curved metal screw under his floating rib and pulled. It was a devastating, cripplingly painful, but non-lethal disabling move. Delta's body seized. All the air left his lungs in a single, agonizing whoosh. He dropped the knife, which clattered on the floor, and sank to his knees, clutching his side, incapacitated. 3 down. The entire exchange had taken less than 12 seconds. Laura stood, breathing lightly, her chest rising and falling. Her apron was spattered with coffee and a single drop of Charlie's blood. She smoothed it down. The dining room was a frozen tableau of horror. The billionaire, the senator, the hedge fund manager. All were staring at the quiet waitress, who had just systematically and almost silently dismantled 3 trained mercenaries. Jonas Thorne, still huddled in his booth, looked at the carnage. He looked at the bodies. Then he looked at Laura. His expression wasn't Vite gratitude. It was pure, unadulterated awe. "My God," he whispered. Only 2 attackers remained, Bravo and the leader, Alpha. And Alpha had just pulled a gun, a real one, a Heckler & Koch VP9. The sound of him racking the slide was the loudest thing Laura had ever heard. "Impressive," Alpha said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He leveled the pistol, not at Laura, but at Jonas Thorne's head. "Very impressive, Kestrel." Laura's blood ran cold. She hadn't heard that name in 7 years, not since the fire, not since the betrayal in Damascus. Alpha reached up and, with a slow, deliberate motion, pulled off his balaclava. The face underneath was not one she recognized immediately. It was scarred, the left side of his mouth pulled into a permanent, grim sneer. But the eyes, she knew the eyes. "Markus," she breathed. Her voice, for the first time, was not the waitress's. It was her own. "Hello, Laura," said Markus Hess, the man who had led her team into an ambush, the man who had sold them to the SVR, the man she'd been hunting ever since. "You were always sloppy. You left a witness in Aleppo? Me." "The attack," Laura said, her mind racing, processing the new, impossible data. "This isn't about him, is it?" Markus smiled, a hideous thing. "Oh, it was. Helios Dynamics has a new drone prototype. My clients want it. Mr. Thorne here was the prize." He pressed the muzzle of the VP9 harder against Thorne's temple, causing the billionaire to whimper. "But you," Markus continued, his eyes locked on Laura. "You are a bonus, a ghost, a loose end I get to tie up personally." The situation had changed. This wasn't a protection detail. It was an assassination. "You talk too much, Markus," Laura said. Her voice was ice. "You always did." "And you were always arrogant," he snapped. "You think you can save him? You're a waitress. You have a corkscrew. I have a 9mm. Asset. Thorn. Hostile. Markus. Weapon. Pistol. Contact range with asset. Hostile. Bravo. Location. Bar. 20 feet. Weapon. Taser. Likely upgrading. My status. Exposed." She had to separate them. "Bravo!" Markus yelled, not taking his eyes off Laura. "Forget the room. Get the package. Now!" Bravo, who had been covering the other patrons near the bar, now advanced. He was the largest of the group, a true heavyweight. He had his taser out, but seeing his 3 colleagues writhing on the floor, he was clearly hesitant. Laura knew she had seconds. She couldn't fight them both. She had to eliminate Bravo, and she had to do it in a way that didn't give Markus a clean shot at her or Thorn. She looked at Jonas Thorn. "When I move, fall to your left, hard." Thorn, his eyes wide with terror, just stared. "Do it!" Laura commanded, her voice cracking like a whip. She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy 40 Sabordello salt cellar from table 5. "Markus!" she yelled. He flinched. She threw the salt cellar, not at him, but at the plate glass window 10 feet to his right. The crash of the window shattering was explosive. The wind howled into the room. It was the perfect distraction. In that split second, Bravo looked toward the sound. It was all she needed. Laura moved. She didn't run at Bravo. She ran past him. As she passed, she grabbed a linen tablecloth from an empty table and spun, snapping it like a bullwhip. The heavy fabric wrapped around Bravo's head and neck, blinding him. He staggered, tearing at the cloth. Laura didn't stop. She vaulted onto the bar, her feet landing silently on the polished mahogany. "She's at the bar!" Bravo roared, finally ripping the cloth away. But Laura was already in motion. She grabbed a bottle of high-proof vodka, Belvedere, from the top shelf. Bravo raised his taser. She threw the bottle. It wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at the hard marble floor at his feet. The bottle shattered, spraying the man's tactical boots and the floor around him with 80 proof alcohol. Bravo looked down, confused. "Vodka?" Laura grabbed the nearest thing, a long-stemmed bar lighter used for cigars. She clicked it. A 2-inch blue flame appeared. Bravo's eyes widened. "Niet." Laura tossed the lighter. It fell in a perfect, gentle arc. The moment the flame touched the alcohol-soaked floor, the world erupted. A low-frequency whoomp shook the room as the vodka ignited in a brilliant blue-white flash. The flames rushed up Bravo's legs, engulfing his tactical pants. He shrieked, a terrifying animal sound, as he was instantly wreathed in fire. He dropped his taser and beat at his legs, collapsing to the ground in a desperate, fiery roll. 4 down. Laura landed lightly on the floor, the fire reflecting in her cold, still eyes. She turned. Markus was alone, and he was furious. He had lost his entire team. He had lost his payday. "You bitch!" he screamed, his professional demeanor shattering completely. He shoved Thorn to the floor, abandoning the abduction plan. This was personal. He raised his pistol and fired. Pop! The sound of the suppressed shot was still loud in the room. Laura had already moved, diving behind a thick, overturned oak table. The bullet zipped through the air where she had been, striking a bottle of champagne, which exploded in a shower of glass and foam. "You can't hide, Laura!" Markus yelled, advancing, his pistol held in a 2-handed grip. "I was better than you in training, and I'm better than you now." He fired again. Pop! The bullet chunked into the wood of her cover. Laura was trapped. He was a good shot. He was methodical. He was firing 1 shot every 3 seconds, pinning her. She had no weapon. She had no exit. She looked around, her mind racing. Cover. Wood. Ineffective. Hostile. Advancing. Options. 0. Then she saw it. On the floor, 10 feet away, lay Rick. the bodyguard. He was still unconscious, and on his hip, still snapped in its holster, was his Sig Sauer. It might as well have been on the moon. Markus fired again. Pop! Wood splinters flew past her cheek. "I know you're out of options, Kestrel. It's over." Jonas Thorne, who had been frozen on the floor, looked at Laura. He saw the desperation in her eyes. He saw where she was looking. He looked at Markus, who was reloading, seating a new magazine with a practiced click. Thorne, the man who had never done a physical thing in his life, made a choice. He wouldn't be a victim. Not again. "Hey!" Thorne yelled, his voice thin. Markus turned, annoyed. "Stay down, old man." You missed," Thorne said, panting. Markus laughed. "What? Your tie," Thorne said, pointing. It's crooked." It was the most absurd, idiotic thing to say, and it worked. Markus, a man of lethal pride, instinctively glanced down at his tie. It was a 75-second window. Laura exploded from cover. She didn't run for the gun. She ran at Markus. He looked up, shocked, and tried to raise his pistol, but she was already inside his guard. She didn't go for his weapon. She went for him. This wasn't Krav Maga. This was Sambo. This was a system designed for one purpose: to end a fight in the most brutal way possible. She slammed her body into his, her left hand grabbing his right wrist. The gun hand, her right hand grabbing the fabric of his suit jacket by the shoulder. She didn't try to pull him. She dropped. She fell to the floor, planting her foot on his hip and pulling him over her, using his own weight and momentum against him. It was a perfect, rolling hip throw. Markus, a 220-pound trained killer, flew through the air, his gun sailing from his grasp. He landed on his back on a table of half-eaten appetizers, the sound of his spine hitting the wood echoing with a sickening thud. Laura was on him in an instant, but he was fast. He rolled off the table, grasping for the nearest weapon, a heavy, serrated steak knife. He came at her, roaring. Now they were even. The fight was no longer tactical, it was primal. Markus lunged with the steak knife, a raw, downward stab. Laura sidestepped, the blade whispering past her apron. She used her open palm to strike the inside of his elbow, trying to force a dislocation. He grunted, his arm buckling but not breaking. He was strong. He spun, a back fist aimed at her temple. She ducked, the wind of the blow ruffling her hair. "You were always fast," he panted, his eyes burning with hatred. "But you have no weight, Kestrel. No power." He feinted with the knife and drove a heavy boot into her stomach. The air exploded from Laura's lungs. The pain was immediate, blinding. She stumbled back, crashing into a server station, glasses and silver cutlery raining down around her. For a second, the world went grey. Markus smiled, advancing slowly. "There it is. The weakness. You were always soft. You never took the kill shot in Damascus. You let me live." He was right. She had him cornered in that burning consulate. She had her knife to his throat, and she had hesitated. A 5-second hesitation. It was enough. He had triggered the explosion that scarred him, killed her team, and forced her into hiding. "I won't make that mistake again," he whispered, raising the knife. As he lunged for the killing blow, Laura's hand, which had been scrambling through the pile of fallen silverware, found what it was looking for. A wine bottle. A heavy, dark green bottle of 09 Bordeaux. She didn't try to block the knife. She swung the bottle in a tight, desperate arc. It connected not with his head, but with his knife hand. The sound of shattering glass and snapping bone was one. The steak knife flew free. Markus howled, clutching his right hand, his fingers now a bloody, mangled ruin. But he wasn't done. With a roar of pure adrenaline-fueled rage, he tackled her, his uninjured left hand clawing for her throat. They both went down, crashing to the marble floor. He was on top of her, his weight pinning her. His left hand, a claw, closed around her neck. "Die!" he screamed, his face inches from hers, spittle flying. Laura's vision began to tunnel. Black spots danced in her eyes. She was losing. He was too heavy, too strong. No, not like this. Not here. Not in this stupid apron. Her hands, trapped between their bodies, fumbled. Her right hand was still holding the broken neck of the wine bottle. It was a jagged glass shiv. With the last of her consciousness, she twisted her hips, creating a half-inch of space. It was enough. She drove the broken bottle upward, into his side, just under his ribs. Markus Hess froze. His grip on her throat slackened. A look of profound, almost comical surprise crossed his face. He looked down. He looked back at her. "Sloppy," he gurgled. He collapsed on top of her, a dead weight. Laura lay there for a long, long moment, the 220-pound corpse of her betrayer crushing her. She was gasping, sucking in the air, her throat raw. The silence of the room was deafening, broken only by the crackle of the fire from Bravo's body and the distant, now approaching wail of sirens. She pushed. "Get off me." With a final, agonizing effort, she shoved Markus's body off of her and rolled to her knees. She was covered in wine, blood, and glass. Her apron was torn. Her hair was matted. She looked up. Every single person in the room was staring at her. The senator, the hedge fund manager, the surgeon's wife, and Jonas Thorne. He was standing now, his 8-ton muscellero suit in disarray. He was looking at her not as a hero, but as a curiosity, a thing he didn't understand. Laura slowly got to her feet. She looked at the carnage, the 5 men, the fire, the shattered glass. She looked at her hands, which were shaking, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb, leaving a vast, cold emptiness behind. "Mom?" Laura turned. A small, terrified busboy was peeking out from the kitchen, his eyes as wide as saucers. "Mom," he whispered, "your table. Table 9. They said their steak was overcooked." Laura looked at the busboy. She looked at the chaos. She looked back at the busboy. She took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to find the waitress persona again. She couldn't. It was gone. "Tell them," Laura said, her voice a raw whisper. "The kitchen is closed." The first responders who breached the dining room of Aperture didn't find a restaurant. They found a war zone. NYPD emergency service units, weapons raised, swept the room, shouting commands that were met with the whimpers of the super-rich. Paramedics rushed in, their faces grim. They pronounced Rick, the bodyguard, dead at the scene. Not from the taser, but from the blunt force trauma of his head hitting the marble. They tagged Markus, dead from exsanguination, and Echo, dead from his crushed larynx. Charlie and Bravo were in critical condition with severe burns and head trauma. Delta was curled in a fetal position, sobbing, his ribs shattered. The survivors were processed. The patrons were wrapped in shock blankets and hurried into elevators, their lawyers already en route. Laura sat on a stool at the service station, her hands cuffed in front of her. It was standard procedure. She was the only one, aside from Thorne, who was coherent. A detective, a woman with tired eyes and a trench coat that smelled like old coffee, approached her. Her name tag read Karras. "Detective Maria Karras, 19th Precinct," she said, pulling up a chair. "So, Laura Jenkins, 29 years old. Address in Queens, no priors, not so much as a parking ticket. You've been working here for 2 years. Laura nodded, her throat still aching. "Yes, Detective." Karras leaned forward, her voice low. "All right, Laura, off the record just for a second. What the hell happened in here?" "They attacked," Laura said, her voice flat. I defended myself. Karas let out a short, harsh laugh. You defended yourself? Kid, I've seen the security footage. You didn't defend yourself. You liquidated a 5-man professional extraction team. The guy by the bar. You lit him on fire. The big one in the middle. You used a corkscrew to pop his ribs. That's not a self-defense class you took at the Y. Laura remained silent. She gave her cover story. It was thin, practiced, and utterly unbelievable. I panicked. I got lucky. Lucky, Karas repeated, nodding slowly. You got lucky 5 times against men armed with tasers, knives, and guns. The only luck in this room, Ms. Jenkins, was that you were on the clock, my guess. You're ex-military. Special forces. I was a waitress, detective. Right, and I'm a ballerina. Karas stood up, frustrated. You're a ghost. Your fingerprints don't match any government database, which means you're in a government database they don't let me see. CIA, DIA, one of those 3-letter clubs. Before Laura could answer, a man in a sharp, dark blue suit walked up. He wasn't a cop. He had the clean, cold look of federal service. Detective Karas, thank you for your service. We'll be taking it from here. Who the hell are you? Karas asked. This is now a matter of national security, the man said, flashing a badge she barely had time to read. Miss Jenkins is being transferred to our custody. She's my witness? No, the man said, his voice final. She's not. The room is sealed. This event is now classified. Thank you. Karas looked at Laura, her expression a mix of anger and a strange, grudging respect. Good luck, kid. You're going to need it. The spook unlocked Laura's cuffs. Ms. Jenkins, with me. As Laura was being escorted out, Daniel, the restaurant manager, ran up to her. His face was pale. Laura, this is a disaster, a complete and utter disaster. Daniel, you're fired, of course, he said, wringing his hands. Weapons? Fire? Dead bodies in the dining room? We'll be sued by everyone. We'll lose our Michelin stars. You're a liability. You're fired. Laura just stared at him. She had saved his life. She had saved everyone's life, and she was fired. She felt a bitter laugh bubble in her chest. Of course she was. Okay, Daniel, she said. We'll mail you your last check, he muttered, turning away to speak to an insurance adjuster. Laura was escorted into the service elevator, the spook on one side, another on the other. The doors slid shut, sealing her off from the life she had tried to build. The first responders who breached the dining room of Aperture didn't find a restaurant. They found a charnel house, NYPD emergency service units, ballistic shields raised, swept the room, their shouted commands, "Show me your hands. Don't move," echoing in the cavernous space. They were met with the whimpers and traumatized sobs of the city's financial elite. Paramedics, faces grim and pale, moved with practiced urgency. They pronounced Rick, the bodyguard, dead at the scene. Not from the taser, but from the catastrophic blunt force trauma of his head striking the marble. They tagged Markus Hess, dead, exsanguination from a femoral artery nicked by the jagged bottle, and Echo, dead, crushed larynx. Charlie and Bravo, the fireman and the coffee man, were in critical condition, their bodies a ruin of third-degree burns and severe neurological trauma. Delta, the man with the broken ribs, was curled in a fetal position by the bar, sobbing, his professional composure utterly shattered. The survivors were processed. The patrons, wrapped in mylar shock blankets that crinkled with every tremor, were hurried into elevators, their personal assistants, and, more importantly, their lawyers, already filling the lobby 42 stories below. Laura sat on a high stool at the service station, her hands cuffed in front of her. It was standard procedure. The metal was cold against her raw, blood-caked skin. She was the only one, aside from Thorne, who was coherent. She was also the only one being treated as a suspect. A detective, a woman with weary, intelligent eyes and a trench coat that smelled like old coffee and damp wool, approached her. Her name tag read Karras. Detective Maria Karras, 19th Precinct, she said, her voice a low, gravelly alto. She didn't sit, just leaned against the marble bar. So, Laura Jenkins, 29 years old, address in a walk-up in Astoria, Queens. No priors, not so much as a parking ticket. You've been working here for 2 years. Laura nodded, her throat still aching from Markus's grip. Yes, detective. Karras let out a short, harsh, mirthless laugh. All right, Laura, off the record, just for a second. What the hell happened in here? They attacked, Laura said, her voice flat, the practiced lie already forming. They had guns, they killed that man. They attacked Mr. Thorne. I defended myself. You defended yourself? Karras repeated, her eyes scanning the battlefield Laura had created. Kid, I've seen the security footage from the bar camera. The main feed was cut, but the bar feed... Jesus, you didn't defend yourself. You liquidated a 5-man professional extraction team. The guy by the bar? She pointed with her chin. You lit him on fire. The big one in the middle? You used a corkscrew to pop his ribs like a beer can. That's not a self-defense class. You took at the Y. Laura remained silent. Her mind was a cold, clear space, the adrenaline ebbing and leaving behind a vast, glacial calm. She recited the cover story she had rehearsed in her head for 7 years, just in case this day ever came. I panicked. I got lucky. I don't know what happened. Lucky? Karras repeated, her eyes narrowing. You got lucky 5 times against men armed with tasers, knives and guns. The only luck in this room, Ms. Jenkins, was that you were on the clock. My guess. You're ex-military. Special forces? I was a waitress, detective. Right, and I'm a ballerina. Karras stood up straight, her patience evaporating. You're a ghost. Your fingerprints don't match any government database, which means you're in a government database they don't let me see. CIA? DIA? One of those 3-letter clubs? You in some kind of trouble? Is that what this was? Before Laura could answer, a man in a sharp, dark blue, impeccably tailored suit walked up. He wasn't a cop. He had the clean, cold, emotionless look of federal service. He didn't look at the bodies. He looked at his watch. Detective Karras, thank you for your service. We'll be taking it from here. Who the hell are you? Karras bristled, her hand instinctively moving toward her hip. Agent Carter, this is now a matter of national security, the man said, flashing a badge in a leather wallet. Karras barely had time to read it. Mr. Thorne is a Priority 1 government asset. This entire incident is now classified under the Patriot Act, Title 3. This is my crime scene, Karras protested, but her voice had lost its conviction. She was outranked, and they both knew it. This was your crime scene, detective, Carter corrected him, his voice devoid of any human warmth. It is now a federal matter. All files, all footage, and all witnesses are being transferred to our custody. Thank you. He produced a small key and, to Karras's visible shock, unlocked Laura's handcuffs. The metal fell away. She's my witness, Karras started. No, Carter said, his voice as final as a closing vault. She's not. The room is sealed. This event is now classified. Thank you. Karras looked at Laura, her expression a toxic mix of frustration, anger, and a strange, grudging respect. Good luck, kid. You're going to need it." "This way, Ms. Jenkins," Carter said, gesturing with his hand. As Laura slid off the stool, her legs unsteady, Daniel, the restaurant manager, ran up to her. His face was pale and slick with sweat, his eyes wide with a different kind of terror. The terror of financial ruin. "Laura! Laura, this is a disaster! A complete and utter disaster!" he shrieked, wringing his hands. "Do you see this? Do you see it?" "Daniel, Laura started, unsure what he even wanted. "You're fired, of course," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush of panic. "Weapons? Fire? Dead bodies in the dining room? We'll be sued by everyone. We'll lose our Michelin stars. You're a liability. You're fired. Fired." Laura just stared at him. The man's restaurant had been the target of a military-style abduction, his patrons had been held hostage, and his primary concern was his rating in a food guide. She had saved his life. She had saved all their lives. And she was fired. A bitter, hysterical laugh bubbled in her chest. Of course she was. It was the most normal, predictable thing that had happened all night. "Okay, Daniel," she said, her voice a raw whisper. "We'll mail you your last check," he muttered, already turning away to speak to an insurance adjuster, his face a mask of practiced grief. "This way, Miss Jenkins," Agent Carter repeated, his hand gesturing firmly toward the service corridor. She was flanked by Carter and another agent, a woman with a face just as blank and professional. They didn't touch her, but they walked so close she could feel the body heat from them. They were a human cage. They didn't take her to the public elevators, which were now crowded with uniforms. They led her to the private service elevator in the back. The doors slid shut, sealing her in a small, stainless steel box with two people who looked at her as if she were a piece of complicated, dangerous machinery. The elevator didn't go to the lobby. It went to the sub-level parking garage. The thrum of the elevator motor ceased. The doors opened onto a vast, cold, concrete expanse. The air was damp and smelled of exhaust and curing cement. It was utterly empty, save for a single, gleaming black Maybach sedan parked directly in front of the doors. It wasn't a car. It was a land-bound yacht, a fortress of tinted glass and polished obsidian. Its parking lights were on, casting two faint white pools on the floor. "In," Carter said, opening the rear door. Laura hesitated. This was it. This was the dark room, the rendition, the end of her life. "Now, Miss Jenkins." She slid onto the leather. It was impossibly soft, the color of rich cream. The door closed with a heavy, soundproof thud, sealing her inside. The wail of the sirens from the street above instantly vanished, cut off as if by a knife. The silence was absolute. The man sitting across from her was Jonas Thorne. He was not the same man from the booth. The terror was gone. The panic, the weakness, the slight tremor in his hands. All of it had been erased. He had changed his suit. He was now in a crisp, dark, charcoal three-piece, his silver tie perfectly knotted. He was holding a heavy crystal tumbler with a small amount of amber liquid. He looked calm, his arctic blue eyes appraising her over the rim of the glass. He didn't look like a victim. He looked like a king in his throne room. "That was," Thorne said, his baritone voice smooth and relaxed, "the single most extraordinary thing I have ever witnessed." Laura said nothing. She stared at her own reflection in the tinted window. She was a horror show. Her hair matted with blood and champagne, her apron torn and spattered. A long, red welt was already purpling on her throat. "Rick, my bodyguard," Thorne continued, swirling the whiskey in his glass, "was ex-Secret Service, team leader for the First Lady's detail. He cost me $450,000 a year, plus bonuses. He lasted 3 seconds. You, on the other hand, cost the restaurant $22 an hour plus tips, and you neutralized 5 men. 5. I had my team run the audio from my phone, which was recording. You used a silver tray to crush a man's larynx, a coffee pot to inflict third-degree burns, a corkscrew Laura, a sommelier's tool, to puncture a man's lung. It was inspired. He took a sip. You weren't defending yourself. You were performing a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. You didn't just fight them, you humiliated them. Why am I here? Laura's voice was hoarse. You're here, Thorne said, setting his glass down in a custom-built holder. Because you have 2 very large, very immediate problems. The first is that you are unemployed. I heard your little conversation with Daniel. He's a fool, but a predictable one. And the second problem? She asked, though a cold dread was already settling in her stomach. She knew the answer. The second, Thorne said, his eyes turning hard as ice, is that you are made. Your cover is blown. Your face, your fingerprints, your DNA. They are all being run through every database on Earth as we speak. Agent Carter, the man who brought you down, works for me, not the federal government. Or rather, my contracts are the federal government. He has already quarantined your data, but he's not the only one who was watching. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. Markus Hess. Ring a bell? Of course it does. I heard you call his name. Ex-SVR, Spetsnaz, dishonorably discharged, went freelance. He was hired by a competitor, North Star Aerospace. They wanted my Helios project, the drone. They were going to kidnap me, force the transfer, and then kill me. The federal agents I employ are already burying this whole incident. By morning, this was a tragic kitchen gas leak explosion. The 19th Precinct's report, including Detective Karras's, will be permanently classified. But your real problem, he continued, is not North Star, it's him, Markus Hess. You called him by his name. You knew him. Which means the people he worked for, the people you've been hiding from, now have a new thread to pull. He let the silence hang, a heavy, suffocating weight. The people who betrayed you in Damascus, he said. Laura's blood ran cold. It was as if he had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart. How? How do I know? Thorne smiled, a thin, predatory expression. Because I didn't just survive tonight, Miss Jenkins. I'm a businessman. I study my enemies. When Markus Hess's name came up as a potential threat, I didn't just buy a new bodyguard. I bought his entire life, his files, his contacts, his encrypted hard drives, and on one of those drives, under a file marked Kestrel, was a 7-year-old report about a compromised operation in Syria, about a team leader who was brilliant, fast, and betrayed, one who was presumed dead, one who had a very unique set of skills. He tapped the window. Your life as Laura the waitress is over. You're a ghost with a spotlight on her. You cannot go back to your apartment. You cannot access your bank account. You cannot be you anymore. Within 72 hours at best, the SVR will know you're alive. The CIA who wrote you off will know you're alive, and they will both want to put you in a box. One will want to kill you for escaping. The other will want to vivisect you for your treason. You have no cover, no money, and nowhere to go. He was right, utterly, completely right. She was exposed. She was done. Her quiet life, the penance she had been serving for her failure, had just evaporated. Which brings me to my offer, Thorne said, his tone shifting. It was the voice he used, she imagined, to close a $10 billion deal. He motioned for the car to move. With a barely audible hum, The Maybach slid silently out of the parking spot and began to cruise toward the garage exit, the tires making no sound on the smooth concrete. "You're a weapon, Ms. Jenkins. A weapon of singular, beautiful design. And you've been sitting on a shelf, rusting, pretending to be a butter knife. I find that offensive. A waste of talent." "What's the offer, Thorne?" she said, the name Kestrel feeling heavy on her tongue. "A new life," he said. "A new identity. One that's not in any database. One that I will create for you. And a new purpose. My company, Helios Dynamics, has a special projects division. It's very private, very well funded. We don't just build drones, Ms. Jenkins. We solve problems. We deal with people like Markus Hess, and we deal with companies like North Star Aerospace. But we're proactive." He picked up a slim, black tablet from the console and slid it across to her. It lit up as it approached her, showing a bank transfer screen. The amount was 5,000. "That's your signing bonus," he said, as if commenting on the weather. "Sorry for the trouble fee. Your salary is negotiable, but let's assume it will be an order of magnitude greater than that per year." "What's the job?" she whispered. "You will be the head of my personal security. But let's not use that title. Bodyguard is such a reactive term. You will not be my bodyguard. You will be my sword. You will be the new head of special projects. You will have a team. You will have an unlimited budget. You will ensure nothing like this ever happens again. Your first assignment," he said, his eyes glittering, "will be to find the executive at North Star who signed this order. You will dismantle his life. You will do it so quietly and so completely that when his company collapses, no one will even know why." He leaned in closer. "And then you will use my resources to hunt the people who are hunting you, the ones from Damascus. You will have my power, my protection, and my permission. Stop pretending to be a lamb, Ms. Jenkins. I'm giving you the freedom to be the wolf you are." Laura looked at the tablet. $5 million. It was an obscene, impossible number. But it wasn't the money. It was the freedom. The freedom from fear. The freedom from hiding. He wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her revenge. He was offering her the one thing she craved, a purpose that aligned with her true nature. "And in return?" Laura asked, her voice steady. "In return," Jonas Thorne said, his smile vanishing, replaced by a look of cold, hard ownership. "Your loyalty, your skills, your results, they are all mine, exclusively. You will be the ghost in my machine. You will do what I say, when I say, no questions asked. I am buying your talent, but I am renting your soul." Laura looked at her own reflection in the dark glass. The mousy, terrified waitress was gone. The woman staring back was Kestrel. Her eyes were cold, hard, and for the first time in 7 years, they were no longer afraid. They were angry. She had traded one prison for another. But this one had better accommodations. This one came with power. This one came with a mission. She picked up the tablet. A line appeared at the bottom. "Press thumb to accept terms and conditions of employment." She pressed her thumb to the screen. The glass was cool against her skin. A small check mark appeared. The screen flashed. "Transfer complete. Welcome to Helios Dynamics." "Welcome, Kestrel," Jonas Thorne said, picking up his glass of whiskey. "I have a feeling this is the beginning of a very, very profitable partnership." The Maybach reached the street, its armored body ignoring the rain. It merged seamlessly onto the FDR drive, disappearing into the river of red and white lights, just another anonymous car in a city that had already forgotten the screams from the 42nd floor. And just like that, Laura's life was over, and a new, more dangerous one had begun. She escaped the frying pan of her past, only to land in the fire of Jonas Thorne's corporate war. She thought she was fighting for her freedom, but did she just trade one cage for another? The story of Kestrel is far from over. This was just the beginning. Thank you for listening to this entire story. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of Aperture and the dark skills of the Waitress, please show your support. It helps this channel grow and allows me to bring you more stories just like this. Hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good thriller. And most importantly, click subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss part 2. Let me know in the comments. What do you think Jonas Thorne will ask Laura to do first?